Welcome to the Upreneur podcast for the University of Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Jeremy Straub.
Ian, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Glad to be here, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it. So I know we got to talk a little bit in the pre-call on that, but why don't you start out just kind of how's the family and how's everybody doing through this lockdown? I think you guys are still a little bit more restricted than we are here in Florida, being in California. But how's everybody been holding up?
We're doing well. Yeah, we're doing well. California, certainly has had an interesting journey in this process. So we've got 5 kids, which doesn't make things easier. when my wife and I started Parker Clay, and she's also the creative director. So we're mom and dad, co-founders, working in a busy business, and 5 kids ranging from 5 to 16 years old. Has certainly had our hands full.
Is any of the kids helped out with the business at all yet? 15, 16-year-olds?
Oh yeah. We got to get them involved, in the business. No, they love it actually. And we travel back, since we left Ethiopia when we all lived there together. We've traveled back at least twice together as a family, and occasionally I'll bring one of the kids back to join in on just what we're doing. So part of the story is the name Parker and Clay actually comes from our firstborn sons. So those were the out of the 5, the kids that came first. So they're always proud to go back and be the namesake of the company.
Nice. Well, and maybe start there. So, when we were speaking, you left an executive job doing well and good trajectory in your business to go move to Ethiopia and kind of start a different type of life. Can you talk a little bit about how Parker Clay was started? I love the story behind it. I know they can kind of check it a little bit out on the website, but talk a little bit about kind of how it came about and maybe why don't we start out with how you left what would be the normal trajectory for a career. Start with that, and then we'll kind of get into the Parker Clay piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So I married my high school sweetheart. We met in high school here in Santa Barbara.
You don't actually hear that much anymore for our age bracket on that side. That's very cool.
I know. Yeah, no, it's not as common. So my wife and I met in high school here in Santa Barbara, and then went to college, graduated college pretty quick so that we could move on and kind of get through life. I've always been an entrepreneur, had a car detailing business in college because I couldn't find a job that was paying enough, well enough. And so I just started my own business and ended up building it, selling it while I was in college. And, as we started our first couple of years off in marriage, we I think for me, the perception of, well, oh my gosh, if I'm going to build a family, I got to be able to help provide, and, how are we going to do this? And so I started really pushing myself and ultimately got a job in real estate development. And that went to San Diego for college, moved back to Santa Barbara after, and started working in real estate development. And just quickly, rapidly kind of going through the rankings of this company, ultimately becoming the VP sales and marketing. And through the course of that time, my wife and I had our 2 sons, Parker and Clay. And we started talking about having a third. In the course of that, we bought our first home. So all these like great, beautiful American dreams. We had 2 cars, 2 kids, bought our first house. And that is where my wife and I started talking about adoption. And so adoption ultimately led us to Ethiopia, and really just had a much longer story there, but had a really incredible experience while going to Ethiopia to adopt our daughter. And
did you go to Ethiopia to do an adoption, then came right back, or did you actually go in to say, okay, we're kind of sticking out here for a little bit?
No, we went there. Actually, funny enough, we considered looking at adopting from Uganda. And one of the reasons we ended up not doing that was that they actually can potentially require you to be in the country for like 3 to 6 months at times. And so there's no way we can do that. Funny enough, we would be moving back to Ethiopia a year after adopting our daughter to live there. And, but it was really the course of that we came back from there in Santa Barbara. And I have like 3 monitors up in my office, and I'm I have one that has statistics about, the historical famines and orphans that are in Ethiopia. And I just could not stop thinking about what we had experienced. And for me, coming back, I think I had perceptions of Ethiopia around poverty and all of these issues. But when I went there, I saw this beautiful country, beautiful people. And I heard from people who said, we want opportunities, we want jobs. Moms who said, I'm not going to let my kids starve, so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to see them in a good place. And so as a parent, it was really heartbreaking for us. And I think that's one of the big narratives that brought us to adopting our daughter from Ethiopia, was because I looked at my sons, Parker and Clay, and I went, I cannot imagine not being able to support them, not being able to help them. And, that was really the kind of origins of this business that we've started. And
so how did you, I think people have had experiences where their heartstrings are kind of pulled, and, they deal with the conflict of going, yes, I think I could do more. I want to do more, but you kind of go back into that American dream, that path that's getting set for you. And even though you had that entrepreneurial spirit from earlier on, how did you go about the decision-making then to say, all right, you know what, I think I can make a difference here. Maybe it's through a business or not, or I'm going to go live there at that point. How'd you get the gumption, either as yourself or as a couple, to be able to make that move?
Yeah. And at some point, there's decisions, right? I mean, I think as you're running a business, you get to these moments too where you have to make decisions. As a leader, you have to make decisions, and sometimes those are hard decisions. For us as a family, it got to a point where we felt like we were made to do this. That all of the good things that have been invested into our lives through education and family and the opportunities that we've been given felt like an opportunity to say, this is what we can do with our time. This is what we should be doing. And I mean, it truly made, and at some level, I would say, I got to a point where I was standing at LAX, Tom Bradley Airport, with one-way tickets in my hand, my entire family, going, what am I doing? This is either the best decision or it's the worst decision I've ever made.
How old? I mean, you have two kids in tow, or three at this point, to be able to take with you. Yep. So it's not an easy decision you're making through to be able to do it. So I can't imagine. So you're standing there at the airport. You're going through. It's second guessing yourself at that point, or no?
I mean, if I'm honest, you're thinking some thoughts. You're thinking, what am I doing to my family? Is this going to be a terrible decision? And I'd say when we moved to Ethiopia, the primary reason we moved there wasn't to start Parker Clay. Parker Clay came as a outcome of living there and seeing things in person. But we moved there because we had found an organization that was helping women out of prostitution, which is a huge issue in East Africa, a lot of trafficking. And this group that we had met when we were there on one of our trips was saying, we can help these women off the streets and do rehabilitation and counseling, but then what? What kind of jobs can we create? And that's where, that kind of one of the light bulb moments along the way was we know business, we know creative, we can create economic opportunities for these women, and what's to lose? Let's go and invest in that. And we had felt like, this beautiful little girl that we had now brought into our family, yet there were so many other kids that were in that same position. And many of those women who were involved and pulled into prostitution, you end up finding out that a lot of those girls are orphans, or a lot of those girls are kind of in that foster care system. And so the passion and the mission all merged.
Yeah, that's what I love. I love the fact that you were able to have a passion and desire to help, and were somehow to be able to tie that into a business model. Because you have 300 employees plus in Ethiopia right now. You obviously have a large, factory there that is helping build for your fashion lines. But can you talk a little bit about, as you started to see the business opportunity there, in particular, Ethiopia is not a place that we think of as a place you want to start a business, right? We kind of all have the pictures from the 80s back in our head of,
right,
kind of seeing the famine there. Can you talk a little bit about where you saw the business opportunities and why you would even decide to start a business in Ethiopia?
Yeah, and it's one of the more, I would say Ethiopia does have its challenges for sure in business. And the World Bank does a ranking on every country in terms of ease of doing business, and Ethiopia ranks pretty high up there. Yeah. But what we saw was this kind of untold story was, you take that picture from Time magazine from the 80s of this woman and her starving child. And we went there, and sure, there was problems, but what we saw was potential. And that was really a huge moment where I realized for years, for so long, people have been focusing on aid as the priority for Ethiopia. And we really saw trade as something that was becoming a huge potential. Ethiopia is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's got a population of very young people who are ready to go to work. There's kind of even a tech growth there. The CEO of Twitter was there just last year. Alibaba is there looking to set up a central location in Addis Ababa for e-commerce for Africa. I mean, so it's got this kind of almost untold story where we've been looking to China as our primary trade partner for so long. And Africa is not been part of that conversation. And I guarantee you over the next, 5-10 years, people are going to start to really wake up to the fact that Africa has such an incredible potential. And Ethiopia, we saw as really the epicenter of that as the African Union meets there. So it's a political hub for Africa. And, so in mind, we were living this journey there with these women who had gone through such horrible things and really the poverty aspect, but then also as a business person, seeing the incredible business opportunities. And that's where we kind of got involved in the leather side of the market, where you see cows and goats kind of going all over the place there. But what you don't realize is it's the 6th largest population of livestock in the world. And these hides and leather industry has been traded since like days of Pharaoh. So it's got this like ancient art, and no one's talking about it. In fact, I went to a tannery while we were living there and found them loading a shipping container with leather. And when I was asking the owner where it was going, he said, "Hey, I'm shipping this to Italy." And it was like, hold on, another light bulb moment.
Because they're known for selling a lot of great leather goods.
Exactly. So if you think about everything made in Italy, you start to wonder, well, is it from Italian leather, or did they source it from somewhere else? And therein lies, I think, this really big conversation around transparency that we're all kind of talking more and more about. Is we want to know where our products are made, how they're made. And historically, that hasn't been a big conversation. So
I'd love to dig into that in a second, but talk me through just a little bit of, you talk about the opportunity in Africa. So you have business owners listening here that are trying to decide, do they want to be able to source through China? They're trying to figure out the right way to go about it. Any advice you would give business owners that would like to be in the States, that would like to find opportunities to source in Africa, or anything, your learnings that you had from having a business that's based there, not just sourcing stuff there, you're actually running a business with employees there, to being able to sell, high-end leather goods here. I mean, I love your bags. I love a lot of stuff on your website there too. So, but so any advice you would give to anybody?
Yeah, and I don't think there's no silver bullet in it for sure.
Yep.
I think that's where, there is challenge. I would say for me, living there, spending time there was a huge aspect of us being able to invest as well as we did. And I think that, like what we're seeing with China is, gosh, I mean, even in current day, there's so much conversation of really beyond China, and that's where looking at Africa, looking at the resources that are there, we cannot continue to write that off as, there's just nothing there for us to look at and opportunities. And it's not to exploit. I think that what I realized, there's also this movement for Made in America, which is awesome. I am an American and I'm proud of that fact. And I think that we also are a very charitable nation, and we give billions of dollars in aid around the world. So, that's where kind of the another moment for me is we're okay and we are behind sending aid to these countries. But what if we could do trade? What if trade became a currency in which we said, hey, actually, that's what we see as the best solution for poverty alleviation is job opportunities and job creation. And I think what we can find is that sometimes as business people, we're moving to a source where we're going, hey, where can we get the least expensive cost on our material? And, there is a responsible way of doing that, of course, and with an efficacy of making sure you do it right. But I would say, broadly saying, don't discount Africa. I would say that depending on your industry, there's incredible places, whether it be especially focused a lot in East Africa, where we're no longer looking at, trinkets where it may be, hey, I'm buying this kind of handmade good that I'm buying because it's supporting someone. For us, what we feel like we're creating is Ethiopia can be a destination for trade, but also a hub for Africa and the world to look at for fashion, and that's where you think of fashion, you think of Italy, and we are trying to change that narrative to say, hold on a second, Africa, specifically Ethiopia, we can be a hub for really high quality premium goods as well. And I think what we're starting to see now is that as we have been successful at that, we're starting to see more people jump in. So you got to be willing to be a pioneer. You got to be willing to take some risk. But in the end, I think you start to see people who are also taking that journey. You get the names of like an Alibaba behind it.
Yeah.
and you go, something's happening here that we need to pay attention
So
to.
you mentioned a little bit beforehand, and I love, I look at some of the fashion apparel that you have online. So I have a Cole Haan duffel bag I use for overnight, and you have one that looks almost exactly just as beautiful as that. Same thing with my briefcase that I use. I mean, it's nice stuff. It's high-end stuff and good quality stuff that I'm seeing coming out of there. But, one of the things that I felt better about, if I'm sitting here going, I'm buying a duffel bag, not to call out competition from Cole Haan, or would I buy it from you? The attractiveness is the give back piece. And I think that's becoming more and more of a trend that people want to be good corporate stewards. We just saw Bezos kind of be spoken out about a customer that wrote an email to him saying that he doesn't want to do business with him if he's going to stand in this manner for Black Lives Matter. So I think I look at like a Patagonia that was probably first in a sense of giving back. In Africa, a lot of people think about Toms because of the giving a pair of shoes for everyone to buy. And we've seen the negative connotations with that have come from the Toms, where they said that it put out the cobblers and that type of thing. So I love the idea that you're actually employing people in there and actually giving back to build out the economy. Can you just talk a little bit about, at least from what you're seeing, from your perspective of consumers seeing that as a desirable piece to your business? Or is it just a matter of that you kind of enjoy it and it's something you feel really good about giving back to? It wasn't meant to be a marketing tool, but it ends up now being attractive to people. So I'm curious on, your perspective, because you've, obviously you're in it.
Yeah. And it's a great question. And it's the one we should be talking about. I think as consumers, there's this movement of conscious consumerism, and that's not becoming so much of a niche. It's becoming a more mainstream idea. And I give full credit to the Toms and these other businesses that have, again, pioneered even before us. They've been learning and ways that has gone well, and it hasn't gone well. For Brittany and I, when we started, we really started out of the heart of creating economic opportunities for these women. We kind of have this vision for Parker Clay to end exploitation. We want to end prostitution in Ethiopia. It's a big, huge goal. But we believe in it. We believe that is something that is not okay. So for us personally, absolutely, it's a passion of ours. It's something that we're behind, but here's the key, is that we also believe consumers care about this. And that when consumers have a choice between, hey, if I'm looking at a Parker Clay product, and frankly, even some of these higher end, like a Louis Vuitton and Gucci, we've had emails from customers saying, I've sold my Louis and bought 3 of your bags, because they're proud of.
Yeah, I convinced my wife to make sure I start doing that too. I can use the savings.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And feel good about it. You know, and I think that that's where, and the idea that you don't need to compromise. You don't need to compromise on the style that you love. You don't need to compromise on the quality, that both can be achieved. You can value people and value the products that we love at the same time. And I think that's what's shifting. The market is definitely changing. And interestingly enough, when we were in Ethiopia in 2013, there was a factory in Bangladesh called Rana Plaza. If you guys remember, it collapsed and killed over 1,000 people. And that really was a spark. I mean, just like what we're seeing even today with some of these, the movement around Black Lives Matter, it's this kind of underwhelling of things that have been going on a long time. And the same with fashion industry and how people are treated. It just was this final straw, and people started to step out. And interesting, for us, as we talk to other businesses and you look at some other brands that kind of started around that time, it's just their trajectories are like hockey sticks, because if you truly have a model and a brand and a company that values these things, now don't try to greenwash, because people are smarter than that now. If it's authentic and you can support it, people are going to get behind you. And that's what we've always felt, is that business, that it's that balance between, hey, we can be philanthropic and that's great, but as business owners and stewards of these wonderful resources we have and these opportunities we have, how do we do good with it, right? How do we do good through the normal day-to-day operations of what we do? And as a result, some of the things that we've seen, just like last year, for example, we're getting tons of calls from other companies that want to do big corporate orders from us. So for example, American Express and Delta last year reached out to us and said, hey, we're having a huge event to relaunch our credit cards, and we want your products to be at our event, and we want to share that impact with all these people. They made this custom conveyor belt like you were at an airport, and all of our bags were sitting on there as gifts for everyone to take home with them.
Oh, very cool.
We did an impact report where we said, hey guys, we want you to share in the impact that you're making with us. And so because of you in this purchase, you were able to create X amount of hours of work. We were able to hire X amount more women. And they were thrilled. They loved that. And so it's resonating, not just with consumers, but even business to business.
That's awesome. Good example. So let's talk a little bit about the fashion industry, because it's a very busy industry. You have a lot of people that want to play in that space just because they have interest in there. My wife owns a couple boutiques, so she's in the fashion side. But because it's a busy space, there's a lot of unsuccessful businesses and bad advice going through there. So for someone that's thinking about getting in the fashion industry, what's some bad advice you hear in that industry? Or if you want to play the flip side of that, what's some good advice you might give if you don't want to hear some bad advice that you usually hear in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it goes back to the prior question too. Is the question around ethical fashion, the question around sustainability. Those are the types of things that I think are topics that are coming up. So when you see brands like Forever 21 that are going bankrupt, and so the term fast fashion is really becoming a well-known idea, where, I mean, the fashion industry has been consuming almost weekly styles. Like stuff is coming in and going. In Santa Barbara here, we had a Forever 21 that closed. And if you, like last week, we walked by and it's just garbage bags full of product. So I think that the movement around slow fashion is something where, if you're going to get into the fashion industry, start to look at those trends around what is something that is sustainable, because the consumer shift is a really important thing to pay attention to. There's a good resource through it's called Business of Fashion that I pay attention to quite a bit. They've got a lot of good resources through their website talking about different trends. They do a partnership with, I think it's McKinsey, every year, talking about kind of the state of fashion, state of the industry. And it's really valuable to talk about where things are going. And one of these things too, even in the midst COVID and other things that are happening right now, is that, they've kind of said it is accelerating a lot of the change that has already been in motion.
Yep.
And, so I think the fashion industry is totally changing. Think about fashion is normally done in these, fashion week in Milan, fashion week in,
Yep.
in Paris. Those aren't happening because people aren't meeting. So the
Yep.
trends around online is another big piece. So even a lot of brick and mortar companies where, curious if your wife has that shop, if it's a brick and mortar, well, what do you do? And you see a lot of pivots to where, hey, we got to get a website up and start to go after our base of people who are loyal to us and say, hey, can you buy online? We can ship it, figure it out.
Yep.
It's
interesting with her. So she ended up doing, it's mostly online and social, but she just does it by appointment only because she wants to have a good schedule to be with the kids and be able to be flexible. So she's like, text me and we'll meet you there and I'll help you kind of shop through, than opposed to running these long hours where you're sitting there and just waiting for people to come in. And then also you got to deal with the fact of COVID and going through. What was that website you said again? The business and fashion one that you mentioned?
Yeah, business of fashion. So I believe it's BOF.
Gotcha.
Maybe BOF.com,
cool.
But Business of Fashion is really good resource for
Google
that.
and figure I love that. So you mentioned a little bit about the speed of change during COVID. And one of the things I've been talking about is I think, most people had a 2-year change plan of kind of where they thought the industry was going, how they're going to be able to implement the change as much as they thought their company can handle and their consumers can handle. And that's just expedited at an extremely high rate during this time period. When we were talking, you really thrived as a business during this time. And one of the things that I learned when we were talking that I just want you to expand on a little bit is that you built a continued, I forget what you call it, was a plan in January, built out a continuation plan on how you can be able to make sure you can run, because you saw some of the trends that were coming about and you were proactive. And from that, if and correct me if I'm wrong here, you guys are up 300% in growth in the last 3 months too. So clearly you had some good foresight into how to be able to manage it. Can you talk a little bit about, strategically, what made you build that plan so early on when other people weren't there? And then how do you think you've been able to thrive during a time period like this, where a lot of other companies are worrying about how they're going to be able to pay the bills?
Good people. Good people around me, great leadership team is I would say at the top of the list. When you put good people around you who are aligned with your vision and what you're doing, that is a game changer. So, I think in part, and then going back to our mission and our values of putting people first. So when we started talking in January, we put together a business continuity plan that enabled us to be ahead of the curve. One of the things, since we are an international brand, is that we're traveling a lot. And so we're seeing the world change often before we might feel it here in the US. And we saw what was happening in China. And our people are our priority. So we put a plan in place for our Ethiopian team to say, we want to make sure, one, our people are protected, and two, any financial hardship that might come, that we're prepared for that. And so, that was what we started, and I'm glad we did. I'm grateful for the jump that we had on it, and we didn't have to let anybody go. We actually are scaling beyond. We're looking to hire 100 more people at our factory in Ethiopia, and we'll probably be hiring here at our headquarters in Santa Barbara as well. But it was hard. It was hard because we had to start kind of scenario playing through the what ifs, but that made us ready. We were ready to then make whatever decisions and whatever things had to come up. And I think, going back to even before that, the type of business that we've been building, that authenticity, and really paying attention to key, some key data along the way, and the type of buyer and consumer we were building, they showed up. They showed up in a huge way for us over these last few months. And it's hard because I know a lot of other businesses that have struggled through these last few months, and to be in an opportunity to really scale beyond has been something that I feel very, fortunate to be part of. And but I think it's also goes back to the consumer is saying, this is a brand we envision in the future. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people have been talking through is, not because we want to see people go through hard things, but these moments are also very refining. And we are able to kind of vote through business and commerce to say, hey, this is something I want to see continue. And that's why I really emphasize that conscious consumer, that person who cares. If you're not speaking to them, you're going to miss out, because that's not only for our generation, but the younger generations that become, the future. That's the language they're speaking. And so I believe we're relevant in that conversation right now.
Well, and I love that you keep bringing up the conscious consumerism, and it's clear that the values of your company are in line with your family values also. It's part of how you started it there with going to Ethiopia for the family, and then it was all of a sudden there was this personal ties that you wanted to make a difference, and then were you able to create a business around, and that comes through this whole conversation that we're having. And you talked about putting people first as what you saw as a success to be able to go through this tough time for a lot of businesses and actually figure out how to thrive. But one of the things that I find interesting with your business is your wife is also involved in the business, a partner in the business going through. You have 5 kids all under the age of 16. And yet you still have a thriving business and you're traveling internationally. And so there's a lot of people that are listening that would love to start a business, and there's a lot of excuses of why they can't. I have family ties to be able to do it. Maybe the wife wants to be home a lot, so to start a business on the side while they're working through, or vice versa, the wife having a business. I know when my wife started her business, I was used to her being a stay-at-home wife, and it took me adjustment on the spousal side to get used to her all of a sudden having to be gone at night when I'm usually the one who's gone for business. Can you just talk a little bit about any advice you might give to people that are either starting a business and are struggling with the balance between the kids and the either being business with a spouse or just, having to have a successful marriage and family while they're doing it? Because you seem to, and I'm sure that there's the struggles that go along with it, but you figured out how to be able to kind of get it all to work together. Any advice you would give?
Yeah, such a good question. I think that the balance is, balance is such a weird word, and I feel like sometimes it just doesn't make sense. I think that for Brittany and I, we've always prioritized our marriage as something that is at the top of the list. Even as we've had more kids, being able to kind of take vacations or get away, even if it's for a night or two, that's been super important in investing in that. I think that home life, ultimately for us, there's moments where I could be talking to my wife and going, am I CEO or am I your husband right now? Because those might be 2 very different answers, and being able to clarify that is key. I think as you continue to lead more people, as I now have hundreds of people that are under my watch, there's a weight, and there's constant conversations with other leaders that I have where, things like it's lonely on top, right? And, there's things that as a leader, you may not share with the rest of your team or other people because you're supposed to be the one leading, yet being vulnerable. And I recently did this with my team where I took a leadership kind of evaluation and had them speak into my life. And there's things that I know I'm growing in. But I think when you put good people around you, there's trades, where we're investing in other people's lives, but they also get to invest in ours. And I would say that, what I've seen, the temptation for me is that it's just work harder and just work more and nonstop. Yep. And then you start compromising your health, your family. And, for me, I just have to make an intentional decision that it's not worth it, right? My marriage is worth more than my business. My family is worth more. And I have to prioritize that. And then including myself, this idea of even mindfulness and being able to kind of go, like I think I downloaded the Calm app the other day, and I started listening to a series of LeBron James going through just, his voice and this just moment to kind of pause, ended up being very filling for me. And, and so I think those things are super important, is that you do actually take time to pause, because the temptation is just work harder.
I love a number of things you said there. The first part, when you were going through with regard, well, let's go through everything. So the calm app's an interesting one. It's funny how meditation and awareness of the moment has now become corporate vogue for good reason, though, on that side.
Yeah.
And you're seeing more and more people and more companies start to realize that that ability to slow down and to be able to kind of focus in on what's important allows you to be more successful. When you started the conversation, you talked about balance. And what I always share with people is that a balance of a day isn't really there for a business owner. There's some days where it's going to be so much more work focused. There's other days where it's just going to be family. And where I always tried to have is a really good balanced month where, you know, if I have a week-long vacation with my family, I know the next week I might be a little bit busier those nights. It might be a little bit later than beforehand. But I love how the priorities, and again, I just see this throughout this whole conversation, your priorities and values are abundantly clear, that your marriage is before your business, and it's always tracked that way. And I think your ability to be transparent and authentic with your employees, to see that not as what could be perceived as a vulnerability, but they actually see it as a strength and something they want to emulate. And that's not how you mean it to be, but it ends up being that way. Because you're sharing the parts that what's important to you, what might be you worried about, what you're concerned about, to be able to do. And so I think there's a lot of pieces in there. I hope everybody can kind of unpack and see. Two last questions for you. First one is around your favorite failure. So, you know, when I ask people about failures, everybody says it's a good learning response. I don't think I had any real failures or all things like that, which I agree with it. But there's these favorite downturns you might have had either in your life, your business, or something like that you learned a lot from, that you felt like you got strength from. Any favorite failures come to mind for you?
That's a great question. One I'm sure everyone loves to talk about. Yeah, I think recently with my leadership team, having a conversation with them about giving me feedback and learning from a lot of the team that, hey, Ian, you love to push, and and I think part of that is this the idea, and this is where I think some of the cause-based businesses that are talking about impact, you want to be careful not to weaponize that. You want to be careful not to also use the cause and the mission to just burn yourself and other people out. And that's a really honest, thing to say. And I think for me, I'm so passionate about it that talking to my team and hearing that might be the case, is super humbling. And learning that also clarity leads to accountability, and that's a separate thing where I've learned that there's times where if I'm pushing and then I'm learning I'm not clear, that I've found that can lead me to babbling. So I give my team permission to say, hey, Ian, can you stop and reframe that, because I don't understand what you're saying. This is just, so I think that some of those are some recent examples for me where I realized that I have been failing in that, and that being aware of it and taking an honest assessment of it has led to so much amazing things in the business for myself and for the team. Temporary pain, but it's been good.
Well, I think, there's a good safety tip not to weaponize the mission, especially if it's a noble mission, as you're trying to drive employee engagement or success. I think it's pretty cool. And I like what you said about clarity leads to accountability. And so where most of the issues I found with people that work for any of my companies is if I was unable to provide clarity on the role or clarity in my expectations, there was always a point where either I was disappointed or that they weren't sure what to do, and they started spending their time somewhere else. And then again, I ended up disappointed or frustrated. And usually it always came back to me. And, I think that's a hard thing as a leader to really see that, because it's a lot easier to say that somebody's not good at the role in that part too. So that was a good learning. All right, last question for you. Now let's go. What was the most memorable day of your career? And so I know you've had a long career, whether it was in the real estate side, whether it was in you actually starting a business, whether it was something that happened during this path that you've had with Parker Clay and kind of where it's gone to. But do you have a most memorable day or experience that you can think of in your career?
A lot. There's been quite a few, and I don't mean to sound lacking in humility in saying that, but I would say that one in particular, which was a big moment. We had our retail shop here in Santa Barbara, which what used to be our headquarters office, retail, and also warehouse, all of it in one.
Yep.
When we moved out of my garage. And a good friend of ours, Mary Louise Parker, who's an actress, we traveled to Ethiopia together, and we ended up co-designing a bag with her, Whoopi Goldberg, and Mandy Moore. And
Nice.
Whoopi Goldberg took us on The View. And for a placement where normally people are kind of really investing a lot, this was something that they just were so passionate behind. And I remember watching our website when she went on The View and just seeing our website light up like crazy. And it was me, it was Brittany, and it was two other employees. And we had like, you know, mini refrigerator boxes. We had phones up to each ear, talking to people. Our website orders are coming in, orders are spitting out. And it was just one of those moments in the history of our business where it was so encouraging, right? Here I am talking about the passion behind what we do. And
yeah, it's a validation on it.
Oh, it was huge validation because we leased this space, and I'm worried like, oh, we're gonna be able to pay rent here. I just made this big commitment, and we did over $100,000 in sales in one day.
That's
and
awesome.
It was just so far beyond anything we had ever experienced. And it was just a really memorable moment for us as a business that was a nod towards, validating, very encouraging, exciting for us to be part of, and also real gritty, you know, because people are ordering and you're behind the scenes going, if people had any idea what this looked like. So lots of fun stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a very cool story. Great way to end it, going through it. And it kind of gives you a sense of bootstrapping it up from the garage to take it the first time you sign a lease, especially a longer lease, is scary as hell for any business owner, because you're just assuming you're going to keep having cash flow coming in and you're always worried the business is going through it. So to have that level of validation from the national audience and to show that actually in sales is very cool. Lots of cool advice and a lot of cool things unpackaged through this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time and doing it. Where's the best place to find you? Is it social, website for to check out Parker Clay? I'm sure if they Google Parker Clay, it'll come up. But
oh yeah, just don't click on that ad that you have to pay for every time at the top. Parkerclay.com. Or on Instagram is another great place to find us. We're very active on both social and our website. But yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate making the time and spreading this with lots of good people who are doing great things around the world.
Yeah, congrats on the success. Appreciate the time too. We'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
Awesome. Bye.
Thank you for watching the Upreneur podcast, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share this with anybody who you think needs to hear it.